Okay, well, good day, everybody, and thank you all very, very much for joining us today. We have quite a bit in store for you. We'll probably go about an hour and a half of content, and happy to take some questions at the end of today. Um, so welcome, and Eric actually just hit us to the next screen and see if this takes over now. But we have, as Eric pointed out, quite a good group of individuals with you today. Let me tell you what we have planned. Going to give you a little bit of background. First of all, just, what's the state of the game today with private brands? Where are we at? And then go on to a little bit, where are we headed? How are we getting there? Particularly focus on e-commerce. So we'll talk about what's new, what's next. We'll also look at private brands then around the world, and literally we're going to go around the globe with the four of us. We can't hit quite every area, but we're going to at least cover the major ones here. And then I think most importantly for many of you is we'll talk about, just what do I need to do if I'm planning or thinking about bringing my products to the rest of the world, particularly if it's going to be in the form of private brands. All right. There we go. All right, so let's start a little bit with the state of the game here. Just a few quick comments. I think it's fair to say we are very much in the golden age of private brands today. They are forecasted to grow globally at a rate of about 7.5% over the next 5 years. Been a lot of studies on this, and they range from 4 to 8 or 9%, but it's going to be very, very good. In Europe, all but one country has now exceeded a 30% market share. Growth in private brand share exceeded that of national brands in 14 of 19 countries that was actually in 2019. We're waiting for this year. We expect it to be about the same. United States, private brands have grown faster than national brands in 18 of the past 20 years. Just 1/3 of Australian shoppers today feel that brand names are important. 50% of the Asian Pacific shoppers in a recent survey indicated that they find that the stock of private brands at the retailer is most important to them in their shopping experience. So move me, Eric. A few things to know here. One is that everybody has the pandemic on their mind, and what has the impact been? And certainly there have been a lot of short-term impacts, but what we anticipate happening is we move into the next phase, the post-pandemic phase, is that we're going to return pretty much to where we were beforehand, albeit at a higher level for private brands than they were before. The other point to know is that private brand development and private brand growth tends to occur very similarly around the world. There are some things that trigger it: retailer consolidation, the kind of manufacturing infrastructure that builds up to serve the retailers. And certainly, as much or more than anything, an evolution of product quality is the thing that probably most significantly drives growth. Retailers over time place greater and greater emphasis. There's a lot of good reasons we'll share with you later. And ultimately what happens is that the second and third tier of, if you will, national branded items are the ones that get squeezed. But most important here is that from a retailer perspective, the argument in favor of their continuing and growing support of private brands is really unassailable. We'll share some numbers to show you what that is later. So this thing I mentioned about the squeeze, originally this work was done by a research firm out of New Zealand about 20 years ago. And they took a look at what happens with private brands as they begin to grow and retailers get very engaged. And essentially the A brands, the leading brands in each country, continue on very fine. Private brand grows, the premium products tend to grow a little bit faster. The value segment of private brand grows as quality improves. So if you think of what's happened with Aldi around the world here, that's a good model there. Premium and specialty grows, and that's happened perhaps even more so in the United States. But the big thing is all these other things that do well, it all comes out of the second and third tier brands. So that's going to be the key difference here. So think of where you're at. All right, we're going to shift on now. Take a look at the new world of private brands and how we are today. So to start us off, I'm going to shift this over to Tom Stevens, our friend up in Canada, and talk about, how have we evolved from imitation, if you will, to really true innovation. Tom?
Thanks, Jim. Well, good day, everybody. You can see me from Toronto, as you say, a bright sunshine today. It's minus 14 C outside my office, and that's about 7 Fahrenheit. So for those of you who see the blue sky and the sun, don't think it's warm here. So good day to all, and thanks for joining us. And we'll talk, as Jim says, a little bit about innovation and how that's impacting us today. So I'm going to try and change that slide, and I do not seem to have that control, Eric, yet. There it is. I don't know if that was that you or was that me?
That was me. That's me.
Okay, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about imitation and innovation. We've seen imitation over the years, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You can see some beer there. You can see a little imitation of Red Bull, which didn't really work too well for Aldi in the UK. And there's Loblaws with its Swiss bar, trying to look a little bit like Toblerone. In the beginning, private brand was really all about replication of product concept, and the whole idea was copying concept, basically. Some retailers did the job really well, with definitely comparable quality. Some went for the idea, but didn't really have the capability to replicate that quality. They might not have had the manufacturing infrastructure to supply them. They might not have had any proper quality assurance internally. So retailers often saw this as a great opportunity to cut costs out of product and offer the customer something that was real value. But as already indicated over the world, when you cut value out of a product by cutting quality, there's no future in that. There's no sustainable future. Customers soon realized that some retailers were cutting corners. And this led to a differentiation in Europe from the rest of the world. European retailers generally got the products right. They learned how to do the job right and offer real value and real quality. But elsewhere in the world, many parts, it did not. And that's still happening today in some parts of the world as retailers in different parts of the world adopt private label. But the whole aim of what we're talking about today is to show you where private label or private brand has gone. It's taken a long time for those countries that started off on the cost-cutting area. It's taken a long time to change, but now world over, people are looking at innovation. Quality is now way, way above what many so-called A or national brands are offering. So there's evolution taking place. If we look on the left of the slide, you can see that's what we saw products looking like that in the 70s. Take the packaging quality out, take the pictures out, take the design out, and offer real low-cost packaging. But the idea was, when it originally started in France, that the quality inside the low-cost packaging was going to be great. But a lot of retailers missed the point there and thought, well, if we're going to take all the cost out of the packaging, let's take it out of the product as well. It didn't work. On the right of the screen, you can see a whole assembly of products from Trader Joe. And I think Trader Joe is a perfect example of what a retailer can do with innovation and evolving products in a totally different manner. There's always been a lot of imitation. Some products were designed to trick customers into buying a retailer's equivalent product from an A or a national brand. And you can see a couple of examples there, where if you really do copy and you really do say on the product, as Target says on the right, compare to scope and have it in a bottle that looks like scope, intellectual property lawyers are soon going to get on top of that one. So that didn't last for too long, thank goodness. Many retailers felt the need to look similar, but to have a quality product inside the package. So there was definitely an idea at the beginning that your product had to look similar so the customer could recognize what it was on the shelf and could see what was going on. And that took some time, and it started to pick up some momentum. But that didn't represent what consumers wanted to see as a real alternative. And retailers soon began to discover that there was a need for a redesign. And since private brand began, retailers have been redesigning left, right, and center all the time. And we've got to be really careful when we do that, that if we redesign, we don't spend all the money on the packaging, but we do put everything into the quality inside the packaging. So some were the same products that were redesigned, some were greatly improved in terms of quality, ingredients, nutrition. And we've seen all those unnatural ingredients disappearing out of products in private brand all over the globe. There's always room for imitation, there's no question. As long as the package tells the true story at a glance, and there's no pretense that you are saying you're the same as the brand, as long as you're doing that, you've got good chance of building a strong business in a core group of products. But that leads us on to innovation. This is real innovation. This product on the right here, for those of you who are not familiar with the decadent chocolate chip cookie, or biscuit as it's called in Europe, that product was created in 1988. It became very quickly the #1 in all of Canada. It's a Loblaw's only product. It became #1 in all of Canada, and still today it's #1 in all of Canada, even though Loblaw's only has about 30% of the market. So what happened? You look on the left, and the #1 ingredient in the national leading brand was flour, and the fat they were using was partially hydrogenated oil. Loblaw said, no, our #1 ingredient has to be chocolate, and we're going to make the cookies with butter. That is real innovation, and it works, and it still works today wherever it's tried. Change the ingredients, give the customer something that they would like, give it to them at a real value, and you've got a winning combination. This gave an opportunity for forward thinkers all over the globe to create new brands, as well as new brand collections. And there's a few examples on the screen. You've got Carrefour, you've got Safeway, you've got Kroger, you've got Asda, you've got Jumbo in Latin America, Spar in Switzerland, even though they're using a bit of an old James Bond there. But this is brand collections. Asda in the middle at the top, which is Diet Zone. You've got an opportunity as a retailer, we all know this, that the retailer controls the brand across all categories. No A or national brands can do that in the store. The retailer does that and can do it really well. And of course, it's not just about food. Why leave it all to somebody who specializes in non-food? And here's a couple of examples. And this new one from Auchan, which has just hit the stores in the last couple of months. Boots #7 has been going for a long time. Kroger's been going for a couple of years. Joe at Loblaw's. There's plenty of opportunity across many, many categories. And then we talk about portfolios. The portfolio of brands can stretch across a store, which a retailer can do and no brand or national brand manufacturer can do. And these are examples of real portfolio leaders. Loblaw's has multiple products under different brands, basically 2 of them, President's Choice and No Name, and then they've developed into the green and the Free From and the blue. The brands at Aldi are interesting. I've been an Aldi shopper for many, many years, not in Canada. We don't have them in Canada, but many, many years all over the globe. And I have no idea what brand I've ever bought from Aldi. I just know it's a great product and it's a great value and it's great quality, but I honestly don't remember the names. Kroger has evolved many different brands in its private label portfolio. So these are good examples of where private label fits in leading retailers with successful programs. And then of course the store becomes the brand. No brand on the top left there, that's eMart in South Korea. They like the whole idea of no frills and no name at Loblaw's, and their whole store is called No Brand, not their whole store, one of their channels is No Brand. Then they went upscale with a new private brand program called Peacock, which is now stores within stores. And you've got some other examples there. You've got Miniso, you've got Aldi and Lidl. Lots of areas where the store becomes the brand, and the customers just know that what they're getting in there is what they want to buy. A few more examples around the globe. You've got Trader Joe. You've got in the middle there, at the top, the red box, which is a gold Christmas brand from Woolworths in Australia. On the right, you've got Pam's from New Zealand. The bottom, the bottle of wine is Selfridges. Tesco with its vegan program, it's rolling out globally. Vegan products becoming really, really common everywhere and popular. And that Jumbo there is Latin America Jumbo. So lots of opportunities, lots of areas. So 2 key thoughts and 2 takeaways for today. Whether you're a retailer or you're a manufacturer seeking new opportunities, are you ready? Are you ready to think about unique products, destination products that customers will come to your store for? Are you as a manufacturer ready to supply a product that can be unique, that can be an artisanal product, that can be an allergen-free product, a no GMO product? Are you able to offer retailers these products? Do you as a manufacturer have a really strong product development capability? And you as a retailer, do you have a strong product development capability or a great relationship with your supplier base to give you the products that you want to compete with? So where do we go from here? Retailers out there are looking for great and sustainable quality that fits certain strict criteria. As a manufacturer, we have to understand what criteria the retailer we're pitching to, what they want and what they need. Some retailers are great product developers. Marks & Spencer, Trader Joe, Woolworths in South Africa, and a completely unrelated chain, Woolworths in Australia. These are companies that really understand how to develop products. Other retailers, some want you to come to them with what makes sense for them. So you've got to do your homework and make sure you know their stores well before you go near their office or near their Zoom screen. Some retailers only want to buy on price, but when they buy on price, it's generally now accepted it has to be at a fixed quality match to something that exists. So even a retailer who's buying and selling on price needs to understand and manage the quality of the product inside the packaging. So in this pandemic world, we all need to decide how to strategize what's the best next steps for us to expand our business. And folks, that's why everyone, I guess, is here today. Thanks for your time and see you soon again in a few minutes.
Okay, we're going to move on right now to what has really started to redefine how we all sell and frankly, as customers, buy products. And Bill Trainer has spent many years working with companies on helping them build their e-commerce approach, and is going to give us some insights on how this all may apply to your plans going forward. Bill?
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. Terrific to be here with you all today, wherever you are in the world. Don't be fooled by my Zoom background there. It's not bright and sunny outside. It's now 2:24 a.m., but feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's great to be here. As Jim said, what I'm going to do today is cover off Amazon and talk a little bit about the opportunity on Amazon. Everybody hears a lot about what's going on with e-commerce, but probably don't really understand the true opportunity that is before.
Hey, Bill, we lost your audio.
Are we back?
We're
Yep.
back.
Oh, that's strange. Don't know what's happened there. Okay.
We lost it again.
Try again.
Okay.
We're not getting the slide movement there.
I'll do it.
Here we go. Okay, it's a good start. Okay, just want to spend a moment just looking at how fast is e-commerce growing. There's been a lot of talk. We all know, of course, it's grown in the last 12 months. E-commerce in the US, we'll focus on obviously one of the largest markets in the world, 137% growth in 5 years, and actually now comprises or contributes 14.5% of total retail sales in the US. Now, this data that I'm sharing here, this is from the US Census Bureau. What this is showing is from 2013 to 2020, the total US retail sales in trillions. So if I just draw your attention to 3 columns in from the left, 2015, we'll just look at a 5-year time frame. The market was 4.72 trillion in total, as you can see up the top, which comprised 4.35 of bricks and mortar and 0.34, so 340 billion basically in e-commerce, which is the light blue box down the bottom. Whiz across to the right-hand side, the market now 5.62 trillion is the estimate, of which 4.8 is bricks and mortar, but very importantly, 0.82% is the growth rate, or is the contribution now from e-commerce. So very substantial growth. So whilst we're seeing bricks and mortar grow, it's certainly most of the growth is coming from e-commerce. If you look at the market over that total period, from a totality perspective at 5 years, grew 3.6% on a compound annual growth rate, of which bricks and mortar was 2%, and just pulling out the point we just raised, 19.3% growth in e-commerce. So very substantial. Okay, Amazon. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, why should I consider Amazon? People hear a lot of different stories about Amazon, and of course, like any trading partner, there are challenges and in dealing with them, but there's also opportunities. I just wanted to share one insight with you that we sort of share with people. If you look at this product here on the right, this organic coconut aminos soy sauce replacement, what's really interesting, if my slide will come up, is that this is actually the #1 product on Amazon in the soy sauce category. And it's not even out of 5,000 products, and it's not even a soy sauce. So the real key message here is that you don't have to be a major brand necessarily to have a really strong position on the Amazon shelf, so to speak. A lot of great like national brands can actually perform very well. However, you can really build a strong business just by having a good positioning, and the people who understand how to make it work on Amazon are those that drive success. I'm having a bit of trouble with slides here, Eric. Oh no, there we go. It's just lagging very slowly. We've covered that off. Okay, try again. All right, just a few key facts about, well, there you go, you're going to get it all. A few key facts about, that's okay, it's better to have it than not have it. A few key facts about Amazon. They are the world's largest online retailer. Their market capitalization a couple of years ago was $779 billion US. They hit $1 trillion US last year in February 20, and now joining the 4 tech giants. The estimate is by end of 2020, they're $1.23 trillion, which is just massive. They're 4th most valuable company in the world. Interestingly, the #1 is a Saudi Arabian oil company at 1.6 trillion, Microsoft about 1.4, and Apple just slightly ahead at 1.3 or thereabouts. They're the 2nd largest retailer on the planet behind Walmart, which is pretty substantial when you think about the fact they're an online retailer. 2019, 281 billion US in revenue, 11.6 billion in profit. And wait for it, it is coming. I hope. Share 52% of online sales. There's lots of conjecture over what the actual gain for Amazon was last year during the pandemic, but pretty much the common belief is over half of the sales in the US online were generated by Amazon. But what's really interesting here is 13.7% of global online sales are now owned, if you like, by Amazon. And in December, they had 3.1 billion visitors, and that's just to the Amazon.com site, not to all the other sites that they own. #4 visited site in the US, #10 globally. And when you think about Facebook, Instagram, Google, etc., which are all the competitors, of course, in that space, that's pretty phenomenal. We mentioned that they joined a tech club in the $1 trillion tech club. And just wait for it to come through. Of the 4 companies within that group, they're the fastest growing from a revenue-based perspective. Revenue, as we said, 281 billion. If you look at the chart on the left, they've actually tripled their revenue in 5 years. So just if you can't see the screen here, Amazon is the orange bar that we're pointing to. The purple is Apple. The red is Google, which is Alphabet, the company that owns Google, and the blue is Microsoft. If you look to the right, from a profit perspective, you can see 11.6 billion. But what's really interesting is that they've quadrupled in just 2 years. So you may look at that profit chart and say, yeah, but they're way behind all the other 4 from a profit perspective. Yes, they are. But look at that trajectory. Amazon have a real history and a real success pattern of investing in markets and as we see as we go through, really building out their platform for future growth. They do dominate the US channel, as we mentioned. Exponential growth expected to continue with both market and category expansion. This really is just pictorially representing the points we just raised, about half the sales in the US coming from Amazon and about 14% globally. So to look at that concentrically, you can see that chart on the left, the US is the outer circle in blue, the inner circle is the global. A lot of people talk about Walmart and Walmart being a really strong competitor to Amazon from an e-commerce perspective. And certainly they are obviously a very, very strong retailer. But what's interesting is that Walmart actually only represents 5.8% of US e-commerce sales. So by comparison to Amazon, they are way behind. So yes, a competitor, but not what I call necessarily at this point, one that's a major threat. The analysts are saying that they estimate there's going to be a 59% revenue increase in the next 2 years or a couple of years for Amazon to 448 billion. And there's going to be a 30%, they'll have a 30% rise in adjusted earnings in 2021. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. So needless to say, key message here is they are on a growth path for sure, continuing growth path. Those of you who are aware of Amazon will understand they have a marketplace program, which is a key driver of their growth. So what this is a third-party seller program. So you can either sell there's a number of ways to do it. We're not going to go through it today, but you sell your brands on Amazon as a third party. So Amazon either manage the distribution for you or you sell them direct, and you pay Amazon a fee for basically being on a platform. If you have a look at this chart on the left, what this shows is the breakout of their revenue and showing where the third party sits within that piece. So the bottom is the e-commerce, the the light blue is the third party, which we're talking about. Then as you go up the scale there, you've got their AWS, their cloud services, etc. Grey is their subscription model, which is obviously Prime predominantly, plus some other bits and pieces. So the real message here is that, as you can see, the e-commerce is growing, but that's also been driven in part by that quite substantial increase in third-party seller growth. What a lot of people don't realize too is that Amazon have been very active with acquisitions over a period of time. In the last last 5 years, I should say, they've acquired 49 companies, and they've kept it on acquired for the most part. A lot of these companies are tech-oriented to help support building out their infrastructure. Everything from a company called Dispatch, which in part was utilized to build that little robotic delivery system you can see there. Body Labs, which is a human-aware AI system, which is really quite random, and PillPack as well. Amazon got quite a strong push into the health sector as well, and just a couple of examples we'll show in just a moment. That's certainly something that they're building out. Just to talk about their global reach for a moment. The way Amazon looks at it, as I said, is marketplaces, and not markets per se, which can broadly be split into three areas: the Americas, Europe, and then Asia, Middle East, and Oceania, which that's sort of the area we've seen a lot of growth in the last couple of years. So they operate in what they call 19 marketplaces. There's over 175 fulfillment centers, so highly automated robotic warehouses. I'm sure you've all seen those on TV and YouTube, etc. Over 180 countries are served, and over 30 categories that encompass millions and millions and millions of products. I just want to touch on Amazon's journey in Australia. They launched here in 2017 with around 7.5 million products available to consumers. 150 million products are now available across 29 categories, and that's obviously leveraging the international network. There's 15,000 third-party sellers, which by comparison to the US is small, but when you think of the market here and where they've only literally just started on a smaller population base, it's actually quite a strong growth, and that's continuing to grow and is a key focus for them. They launched Prime here in June 2018. They launched Pantry in October 2018, about 40,000 products available from a shelf-stable perspective. Their revenue in 2019, this was leaked through to a government body, was 562 million Australians, about 432 million US. But what's really interesting is their forecasted revenue, if you believe the analysts, is going to be 23 billion Australians, about around 18 billion US within 8 years. So for a country that's fairly small, by comparison to some other parts of the world, there's a lot of growth that's projected for Amazon in this market. Amazon Fresh realignment, just wanted to touch what's really interesting. As everyone would know, they bought Whole Foods a few years ago now, and they've been very busy leveraging their ecosystem in Whole Foods. And what they've actually done is expanded their concept into bricks and mortar. So during the middle of a pandemic, they actually launched 2 stores, both in California, one in Woodland Hills and one in Irvine, and Amazon Fresh stores. What they're doing there is blending offline and online. So very much like what you see in China, which we'll touch on briefly later, a lot of tech within these stores, which includes the integrated dash cart, which is like their robotic shopping cart you can see down the bottom. That now joins their 487 Whole Foods market sites as well, which a lot of people have been saying, what are they doing with Whole Foods? Well, and still there's a lot of a few questions around that, but when you go into a Whole Foods store, you'll see that they've started to integrate their system there with their parcel lockers, etc., within that ecosystem. Amazon Go, which is their convenience store, but basically manless or personless, to a large degree personless store. A lot of you would probably know is 27 stores now across 4 US cities. A couple of years ago, when we ran the last Global Masters event, there was talk about there being 3,000 stores globally, or that was the plan. We haven't seen that evolve yet. It certainly hasn't moved as fast as we would have expected, and that's probably driven largely by, I'd imagine, the pandemic and what's been happening there in terms of diverting focus to other areas. So we'll talk about private brands within Amazon. It really is a private brand revolution. Private brands are absolutely a key strategic driver for Amazon as they undergo a very rapid expansion plan. They have over 500 private label and exclusive brands, and you'll see a couple there on the right. As you probably know, a large proportion of the batteries sold in the US are actually Amazon Basics. They have a very key focus on building out the exclusive brand program that they have. They currently have 23,000 products, which has tripled in 2 years. They're very focused too on building out global and regional and specific country mix, not only from a supply perspective, but also from ensuring that they have a differentiation, but it also meets the needs of a customer in that market. The private and exclusive brands business really has been anchored in clothing and shoes and accessories, and still contributes about half of that business, but they have been over the last 2 or 3 years really aggressively expanding into other categories, which is a big opportunity.
Bill, can I interrupt for a second? I've got a question.
Please do, Tom.
Q&A box. Not
Sure.
sure what country it's coming from, but Amazon is demanding social audits as a cost of admission, somewhat cost prohibitive for small, medium enterprise companies. Any suggestions?
It's a very good question, and I'm not 100% sure where it's coming from in terms of what country. The challenge with Amazon is trying to keep ahead of the game, because they are continuously changing processes and changing requirements and gating categories as well. So you can't just sell anything you want on Amazon. More than happy after the event to follow that up and see if I can find out some more information for whoever asked that question, Tom. USD, yep, we went through that. So basically what we're just saying is that's absolutely fine, Eric. 7.5 billion US in 2018, about 25 by 2022. Here's just a few examples of Amazon brands. As I said, there's private brands, I should say. There are quite a few products within the health spectrum. So vitamins and supplements, got quite a big range of products there. You can see wipes, etc. Women's underwear, paper towels. They even sell desk lamps, and they even sell bladder control pills for your dogs. And these are probably some that you may be a little bit more familiar with if you live in a country where Amazon is quite prolific. 365 is an everyday brand that they have. And you can see obviously an almond butter there. They have a range of health offerings, including Happy Belly and a sort of trail mix, so sort of nuts and seeds, etc. Chia seeds. And what's really interesting too, as you can see over on the far right, they also leverage through their product base, also their Amazon Fresh offering as well. So they utilize that brand. And of course, Prime, very strong in nut bars, just as an example down the bottom there, wickedly Prime as well. So really the key message from an Amazon perspective is that they definitely are on a growth path. They are definitely seeking suppliers for private brands. And most certainly, if that's an area that's of interest to you, it's certainly worth consideration. I'd now like to hand over to Jim, who's going to cover off what's next. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very good, Bill. I want to take a look now. I'm going to give you a very fast travelogue of what are some of the key trends that are going to impact where private brands are going and where retailers are going in the future here. And we're going to start on the product side. And there's a lot of things that have emerged fairly recently. And these are around. These are trends. These are not things that are just shown on the market and they're going to disappear in 2 years. But the ones that I think we've most critically identified, certainly plant-based products as they grow. A lot of retailers introducing cuisine-focused private brand lines, whether it be Italian, Hispanic, Middle Eastern starting to pop up in some places now, but brands that are oriented around a specific type of cuisine. This phrase you see, LOHAS, stands for Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability. And that really encompasses a broad range of overlapping interests on the part of consumers. So it's clean label, it's sustainable, it's better for you. And if you think of, at least in the United States, something like Kroger's Simple Truth is a brand that encapsulates all of that. All major retailers are addressing this at light speed. Premium products continue to grow very rapidly. CBD is something we're seeing on the horizon as various regulatory pieces get worked out for those going forward. I know one chain in the US, they have a CBD oil, which, and they are a health and wellness focused change, but it is the number $1 item in their store right now. So there appears to be potential. Local items are gaining in importance, and some of this has to do with sustainability, but also a sense of local pride, whether that be from a country standpoint, a regional standpoint, a province, a state, whatever it is. A lot of unique items making their way to the market. Walmart, of all people, launching a donut cheeseburger. And then finally, we don't know how all this is going to change. We've seen plant-based as a new technology just become enormous overnight. But you can create food now out of thin air, and this is not a joke. You can go look it up. There's somebody with the technology to create food out of electricity. And how these are going to impact products we see in the future, do not know yet. Grocerant is a big trend everywhere. And it's everything from, we're seeing craft beer bars pop up in many places, very large expanded food courts, which are more along the lines of a mall as opposed to what you historically have seen in some larger chains. Many opening full service adjacent restaurants with drive-throughs and whatnot. Food trucks popping on the scene. Again, cuisine focused food service offerings. This is on the lower left, that's Hy-Vee and their high chai approach that they've taken to the streets. Kroger, in a very un-Kroger-like kind of wording thing, has partnered with Cluster Truck to really provide a food service offering in the store that is really focused on delivery and pickup. Very interesting concept, and see how that goes, and lots more down the pike. What's important for everybody here is that if you thought typically just of packaged products, you really need to think about, how can I become part of what's going on with food service at all these different retailers? So the other thing with e-commerce growing, how do I get the product from here to there? Walmart just launched home delivery lockers. These have been in the UK, I know, for a few years already, so that you have temperature controlled sections that are to accommodate home delivery. Several chains now looking at self-driving vehicles for delivery, and there's tests going on in several locations. We've all heard about Amazon drones. Our US Postal Service actually just by our aviation authority has just been authorized to look at having their own drone fleet doing packages. A lot of different ways to get it: remote pickup, using the store as a delivery vehicle. This is interesting. Amazon certainly has done this at Whole Foods. They've done it with many other retailers, but we're now seeing things like here in the US, Kroger and Walgreens partnering so that you could pick up your Kroger order at Walgreens if you were going there. That's kind of a unique approach, and it's a different way to get people, if you will, back in the store with a delivery proposition. Somebody is experimenting now with drive-through stores. It's essentially like a giant automat. You can go in and bring products, and lots of new concepts will be hitting before too long. So retailers are trying to figure out the future with the launch of innovation and technology centers. The one in the upper right is one that all of our group has visited before, which is Woolworths in Australia, their Food Innovators Center. But here we have Kroger, Hy-Vee, Ahold Delhaize, Walmart, and many others developing dedicated staffs, dedicated teams, in some cases, thousands of people focused on how are we adapting new technologies, how are we moving forward with e-commerce, and what is the future of our culinary statement to our customers going to be. Dark stores are going to change the game. The UK has been probably the leader in this. Tesco pioneering many operations several years ago. Ocado hitting the market as the first fully dark store market, if you will. And these are facilities that actually are optimized to do pick and pack, either for customer pickup or for customer delivery. It allows you, if you wish to go this way, basically unlimited range. You're kind of a combination distribution center and whatever. So retailers, some going this direction, some looking at more focused operations. But right now, for example, in the United States, we have Ocado building 20 warehouses, distribution centers in partnership with Kroger to hit pretty much all of their major markets around the US. There's going to be a lot of packaging changes as a result of this. Do we need to ship smaller packs here? Do we need more bulk pack going to these centers? Because the packaging now becomes a little more incidental to the process, and there will be changes. And you need to think about, as delivery and distribution to these centers becomes more important, how do we optimize for that? A lot of new technologies, smart carts, virtual stores, in-store automation and robots, bread bots. You know, we're going to see 3D printers appearing in a lot of places, complete customization of product. People doing smart shelves now, which allows you now to experiment with day part promotions. So I can literally change the price on the shelf. I can have people, if they have an active app that they're shopping with, be notified that, hey, just for you, I have this product just at this time of the day while you're here. It's going to change a lot. Robots are appearing in many, many locations. Some of you may have been on the ECRM webinar a week or two ago, where some of this was covered. Smart label, Digimark, 3D printers, all of this blockchain. If you are in any kind of perishable product, this will be a thing. It is perhaps where the internet was 30 years ago, but we are very much at an emerging point of view here. So I want to just close this section with one comment here, and it's from Bill Gates. And it was, we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Don't let yourself be lulled into inaction. Things you see on the edge, yeah, it may be a thing down the road and you will need to respond. So what we want to do right now is we're going to take you around the world. And Edgar has been waiting very patiently here. We're going to start by taking a look at Europe. Edgar?
Thank you very much, Jim. It's my pleasure to be here. Not sure, is this going well? I don't see myself.
There we go.
All right. So welcome everyone. Happy to be here from a rainy Amsterdam. Let's skip this slide because it's not that interesting to talk about me. Let's talk about Europe. Let's talk about the European grocery market to start with. Then we'll talk about private label. And then, of course, we'll talk about all the opportunity that is here in Europe. A couple of things about this slide. First of all, it's difficult to talk about Europe because we are 48 different countries. So we are extremely fragmented. That's number one, 741 million people living here. And if you look on the left side, it actually starts with Russia. And that's kind of interesting. We sometimes forget about Russia, but it's the biggest country that we have here in Europe. Turkey, number 5, is also coming up rapidly. You see that with an almost 12% share growth number. And then, of course, we got Germany, France, the United Kingdom, the top 3 countries in Europe that we always like to talk about. But the growth is actually coming from different countries. Let's talk a little bit about retail in Europe. So if you look at the list below, it starts with Swatch Group, a big company from Germany. They are the owners of Lidl and Kaufland. Then you got Aldi, Carrefour, Tesco, Rewe. So what you basically see is out of the top 10, it's still the top 3 countries dominating. 5 of them are from Germany, 3 are from France, and 2 are from the UK. Interesting maybe is as well to mention number 11, Amazon. 5 years ago, they were not even on this chart, but you see that they are knocking on the door and will be part of the top 10 soon, exactly as Bill just explained. We have to wait for the next one. But being big in Europe doesn't necessarily mean that you're also a market leader in a lot of different countries, because here you see, for instance, ICA, huge in Sweden. You see Biedronka, a very big company in Poland, BIM, a big player in Turkey, Magnet, the leader in Russia. So you see different kind of big retailers here, market leaders. So in other words, you do not necessarily have to talk to the top 5. You can also talk to any of these guys that are very dominating in their specific country. What's happening with stores is actually that they are getting smaller. They were already smaller than what we were used to in the US or in Canada or in other parts of the world, but they are getting smaller by the week. You see that hypermarkets and superstores are suffering. Their share is getting smaller and smaller. The big winners today are still the discounters, the German discounters, but also people from different countries like Spain and France. So you see discount booming, you see online obviously doing well, and numbers are a little bit bigger than this. I will talk about that in a minute, but also the convenience stores are doing well. On the right side, you see what's really important for European customers. It is about proximity. We like stores that are close by. We do not want to step in the car and travel quite far. Local is a big thing. We like local players. We also like local products, and maybe more today than 2 years ago. So fresh is a big thing. We like to eat fresh. That's extremely important. So we do not go to a store and buy products for 2 weeks anymore. We maybe go into a store 3 times a week nowadays. It needs to be convenient in the sense that around the corner, but also easy to get in and out and easy to make a choice. So not necessarily 50,000 SKUs, or maybe more, something like 20, 25,000, or sometimes when you talk about discount, 2,000 is already more than enough for a lot of people. And value will still be, of course, an important theme across Europe. So online, we have to talk about it. And again, Bill said already a couple of things about it. What you see here is that the top 4 in Europe, the UK, France, Germany, Spain, they are part of the top 10 in the world. But then again, if we're honest, Germany and Spain are rather small. So the UK and France is leading. Europe, especially the UK, is actually doing well. We see some big growth numbers. And I think that last year, we made a big step forward, something like 3-4 years, people say, that we took in 1 year because of the Corona crisis. On the next slide, you get a little bit more detail in terms of where we really are today. If we compare ourselves with the black player, that's China, we're still far away, and I don't think that we're ever going to get there because of the way how Europe is built up from a grocery point of view. But you see that the UK is at least, double digit today, 12%, 14%. We have seen numbers like that, and people think that we easily end up with a 10 to 14, 15% share in Europe for online grocery. Some of the numbers that Bill shared earlier were about online and not necessarily about grocery. You obviously will see that grocery numbers are still a little bit smaller. So people getting worried about this. At the same time, 85% or 90% is still done in stores. So we talk about it a little bit as well in a sec. Please, sorry, the next slide. So a couple of big trends, just to grab them all together. Value will, of course, be a very important thing, and I will come back to that. We're getting more digital in store, as well as, of course, from an e-commerce point of view. Formats and ranges are changing constantly. We need to make sure that our brick and mortar stores are interesting, so we are changing them. We're making it a better experience. These guys retailers need to update their stores quite a lot in order to compete with some of the new competitors in the market. And sustainability, that's a pretty big thing in Europe. It has been important already for quite a while, but you see that this trend is still hot, and maybe because of Corona, even hotter right now. Let's move on to private label. Private label is exciting in Europe. It really is, because what you see here is that many countries are higher than 30%. There's only one that is a little below. I think that Jim already, you mentioned it, and that's Italy. Interestingly enough, Italy has always been a little bit lower, and that's because of the fact that the market is extremely fragmented, and it doesn't really help. You see some of the big guys like the UK, we always love to take as an example. Switzerland, very high numbers. Spain, very high numbers. Interesting is also Greece and Turkey, 2 countries that are already around 30%. 5 years ago, very different situations. So you see a lot going on in Europe, and we are still hitting higher numbers every year. That's why I'm pretty optimistic about this slide. I think that we are not, no, the next one, please. This slide, we are not far away from 50%, maybe even earlier than 2025, we will actually hit this number. So where is this optimism coming from? Let's talk about the next slide, some of the opportunities that we see here in Europe. First of all, there are a couple of developments around us as retail that are definitely helping us. So the COVID crisis helped us because the big brands were running out of stock. And because of that, people had to try private label. Even the ones that did not try before were now willing to give it a try. And most of these people said, actually, we like it better than we expected it. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, we need to save money. So there are also financial reasons for going into private label. I mentioned earlier, the retail landscape is changing here in Europe. We're getting to smaller stores. And on average, it's always true that the smaller the store, the higher the private label share. So that's good news for driving high numbers. Online is doing well. So now we're moving to 12 to 15%, but not only that, they are pushing private label like crazy. And Bill mentioned that already. New customer groups, they're not so new anymore. They're getting bigger and more dominant. Think about the millennials, Generation Z, and those guys actually are more open to private label than some of the older generations, maybe the generation that I'm part of. And last but not least, you see that some of the other parts of the world are actually doing well. Turkey is interesting, I said that. Greece, Central Europe is booming, Russia is doing well, and think about Asia with China and India. So there's a lot of stuff for European players to go after in the world. So this is all helping private label shares. What is also helping private label is the fact that we are doing a better job as retail constantly, every day. I think that fresh is getting way more important all the time. There's a lot of stuff going on in fresh in terms of innovation, and fresh is the area that we own as retail. You see easily private label shares of 80-85% in the fresh section. It's very difficult for CPG companies to play a big role. A little bit more in the US, but not so much in Europe, if you think about it. We really move forward from a private label to a private brand. It's all about innovation. It is extremely customer oriented. It's a fine-tuned balance between price and quality, so the value has become extremely high. And we moved from 3-tier to 2-tier programs, which is also helpful to show more value. So that's an important component. Retailers have been using private label very well to communicate big themes like sustainability, health, animal friendliness. So that was a big push. And I think that a couple of retailers in Europe definitely are at the level of CPG companies when it comes to brand and marketing capabilities or design, product design, or innovation. So a lot of stuff happened there. I will talk about a little bit more in a second. What you also have seen here is that we have seen a lot of product innovation. I said it already, more premium, more new product lines. And the nice thing is that retail is not afraid anymore to come up with in-out product lines. You see that more and more, and if something doesn't work out, then we simply delist it to come up with a new one. And it's a culture change versus a while back. This slide is all about the opportunity areas. I spoke about premiumization already, so we are seeing a lot more products, private label products in the premium section. Fresh is booming. I mentioned that to-go convenience is a big trend. So it's all about ready to eat and ready to cook and ready to heat, but also on the go. I want to use it now and I step in my car and that kind of stuff. At the same time, if you think about all the added value claims, that's really an area that is booming. Think about local, think about personal, think about all the lifestyle claims like organic or sugar-free or salt-free, vegetarian, etc. We will not go over the whole list one by one, don't worry, but there's a lot going on. There are a lot of trends, and private label is simply winning in this area because you have to roll out product lines like this cross category. You cannot do that within one category, and that's a big benefit for retail versus some of the CPGs. Thanks, Jim. Back to you, I think.
Okay. It has been said when you're looking at the United States private brand market, just simply take a look at Europe and wait 5 or 10 years. And to some extent, there's a great degree of truth, and perhaps the gap is closing a little bit. But let me hit at least some of the high points here of what's going to occur in the future. There we go. Okay, first thing to understand is hopefully we have rejoined the world. And there's a couple things that are very important to you, those of you who are looking in from other countries. We do believe that the trade situation will improve and it will get, the US will again become a little more of a globalized country than perhaps we've been the last 4 years. The pandemic will be addressed, and we are hopeful by the end of this year that things will start to return to normal a little bit. There will be some pent-up demand at that time, so it's maybe a good time to be looking at this market. Our federal agencies and regulatory bodies will be run with competence. The economy will be improved, and so welcome back, to all of you if you can come join us. Okay, a key thing to understand what's going on in the United States, which really has been a big brand market, and there's lots of historic reasons for that, but perhaps that era is over. It's dominated our consumer purchase habits for the last 50 years, but over the last 5 years, the major national brands, the top 10 to 15 companies, have lost $145 billion in market share. So private brands are leaving national brands in their wake, as I mentioned before. This has been a steady trend of basically doubling the rate of growth. 2020 is on trend, and we expect that definitely to continue into the future. Premium and specialty are special. Mentioned this before, but if you look at how the growth has taken place here, you look extremely high on private label and perhaps even higher on specialty branded products. Many of you overseas, look at that market, and it's the Specialty Food Association and others that can help get you to market. There's great opportunity here, and to really be selling on both sides or both parts, both with brands and private brands, can be a good way to enter the market going forward. This has been our growth trend over the last few years. We expect to pick up another almost a half point of share growth from 2020 when it's all over, and expect that to continue. The growth, however, is likely to accelerate. A company called Caden Consulting did probably the best job of really measuring what growth would be. And this was a couple of years ago, but they took it over a 10-year period from 2017 to 2027. They identified several critical factors: Amazon, millennial habits, growth in perimeter private brands, what Aldi and Lidl just would do by themselves, what traditional retailers were doing to grow their private label programs, and what was going to happen from new entrants into the retail scene. And where we wound up was a growth from about 17 points or 18 points up to about 26 share by 2027. So far, we believe this is very much on track. We think it may actually exceed that by a little bit before it's all over. A key thing in the American market is that we have changed from private brand being a value proposition to being a values proposition. And what that means is a private brand has to stand for something more than simply being an alternative to the national brand. But many of the leading retailers right now are looking at, if you look at things like Simple Truth, it's really private brands that are leading in clean label, that are leading in sustainability now. We're getting close at least there. And in many of the other factors that consumers are gravitating to much quicker. So it's easy to say, authenticity is key. We kind of describe that as we are moving from Kraft with a K to Kraft with a C, and that will continue into the foreseeable future. One thing to know about the United States, and well, that's a good way to describe it, the United States, is that we do have more space for more store brands, for more premium products. Our retail square feet per capita is the highest in the world by a large margin. And while stores are shrinking a bit in size, and while center store is getting a little more cramped, we still have perhaps more opportunities to put more products in the market than others. Every retailer today in the US is committed to growing their private brand programs. The larger ones have been very vocal and very open about that, particularly with their investor groups. Kroger is now over $23 billion, and they grew 8.6% in the last year. Their partnership with Ocado could drive it even further. We see e-commerce orders actually to be incorporated or including a much higher share of private brand sales than is typical in-store. Walmart is at a 48% online share in CPG and food right now. They are experiencing double-digit growth with their private brands and have made some major reinvestments, particularly with Sam's Club. They are doing and just announced and launched a new global sourcing initiative for their private brands, so pay attention to that. Ahold, a new innovation center, they are adding 1,500 to 2,000 items in the next year. Albertsons has announced a 30% share goal, and they are now at over 12,000 items. They've doubled their online private brand over the past year and a half. Equally important is that the industry here in the US is very committed. Just this Monday, the Food Marketing Institute, which is our major retailer trade association, announced the launch of private brand management, a shopper-centric approach. It was a project we had an opportunity to be very closely involved with. But what it is the first comprehensive industry-wide best practices approach for retailers to manage their private brands. It's based on a lot of analytics. It's based on input from everywhere. It is part of a broader evolution to what's now referred to as shopper-centric retailing. It is FMI's intention to convert the industry from what is now a 35-year-old category management process to one that now takes a look, not thinking of products, not thinking of categories of product, but really more categories of shoppers. And how do we express that throughout our store with private brands at the core? Okay, we're going to take you on about, if this were real time, about an 18 or 19-hour flight right now, bring you back to Bill to tell you about what's going on in Oceania and Southern Asia. Bill?
Thank you very much, Jim. That was great. Some really good insights there. So we'll head down under for a short period of time. Hopefully we will, if the controls will work. That's what's going to happen. Australia and New Zealand. I just want to give you a little bit of background on Australia and New Zealand. Obviously, everybody knows the country, etc., but a few metrics you might not be aware of. Australia is a 2.9 million square mile island. We're actually the world's 6th largest country. Population is about 25, just under 26 million. So clearly, by virtue of our size and our population, we're not very dense from a population perspective, which on a global basis puts us at 192. So well below a lot of other countries in terms of density. Highly urbanized, 90% of our citizens live in cities, and a very strong eastern seaboard concentration, of course, being Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane predominantly. Our friends over in New Zealand, about 3 hours flight away, 103,000 square miles, North and South Islands, which are quite different in nature. A population of 5 million, which puts them at 166 in terms of population density, and not dissimilar to Australia, very highly urbanized as well. So a couple of things we do share. Just Australia, just wanted to touch on our retail market here. It is a highly concentrated retail landscape. The Australian grocery trade is dominated by two key players, being Coles and Woolworths. So we are a true duopoly. 70% of total trade here, supermarket trade, is controlled by these two retailers. Aldi is our only discounter. Kaufland were due to, and I mentioned them a little while ago in his presentation, which was very good, part of a Schwartz group, the 4th biggest retailer in the world. They were due to open here. They actually exited the market and their plans about 12 months ago, unfortunately. So Aldi remains the only discounter here. Woolworths have about 37% share, or just under 37% of total market. Revenue is about 49 billion Australian dollars, which equates to about 38 billion US. EBIT, so earning before interest and tax, about 2.6, which equates to about 2 billion US. Woolworths has quite a number of different divisions, but in there, just bring it back to what we're talking about today, in the grocery sector, there's about 1,000 stores, just under 1,000 stores. Coles, the other competitor, is about 30% share. And it's about 33 billion revenue, about 25 in terms of US billion, and EBIT 1.6 billion Australian, or 1.2 billion US, and about 800 stores. So message here is that these two retailers between them control about around 2,000 supermarkets of very different sizes. But just very quickly look around the, sorry, it's okay. I was just going to say that the other share, Aldi, sits at about 10%. Then we have our independents as well. I think we did skip a chart there, but that's okay. That's the one. Great. Thanks, Eric. I was just going to say, this is a chart from Nielsen that shows where Australia and other respective markets sit in terms of private brand penetration. We don't have updated 2020 figures as yet, but the key point here is that Australia sits really in the middle of the pack. So this is Australia about halfway across from the left. And what this really says is there's a lot of growth opportunities, so compared to other markets around the world. What's really interesting, if you look at the dark blue bar, sort of a little bit further to the right, which is the US, New Zealand is a very, very strong growth market for private brands, and private brand growth actually exceeds branded growth in that market. And they're actually now neck and neck pretty much in terms of penetration with the US, just slightly behind, but close to. China on the very far right, we will talk a little bit about China later, but obviously coming off a very low base, but huge market and huge potential, and a lot of activity in private brand in that space. Okay, just want to draw your attention just to shares, etc., within this market. And one of the key messages here is private brands are keeping pace with branded growth. So just have a quick look at the chart on the right. Coles, 76% of their business is branded, but 24% is private brands. So bear in mind that they're our number 2 retailer. Woolworths, our number 1 retailer, 80% branded, 20% private brand. So Coles are actually the key driver, or in terms of share of business, of their business within the market in Australia. As Tom mentioned earlier, Woolworths are very, very active from an innovation perspective, and certainly chasing Coles' tail in that perspective from a share point of view, but you'll see why there's a little bit of a difference in a couple of slides on. Aldi, by their sheer definition, 86% private brand. And then, of course, IGA, which is the independent groups, there's a lot of independent stores in Australia, is largely private brand, as are others. Private brands, 25% value market share in Australia, growing at 12%. Branded business, 75%, of course, the balance, growing at 13%. So they are pretty much on par. Coles, as I said, which is a number 1 retailer from a private brand penetration perspective, what they call Coles' own brand portfolio, Australian 10 billion it hit last year, or 7.7 billion US, which is up 10% year on year. So very, very key focus. And certainly for both retailers, and I should really say not just these 2 retailers, but Aldi as well, very strong focus on private brand NPD, obviously built around consumer platforms such as health and convenience, but sustainability, responsible sourcing, they're all looking for a real point of differentiation, and it's a very exciting time for private brand in this market. Okay, just wanted to just share a bit of an interesting insight here. This is some data from Nielsen sort of towards in the second half of last year that's looking at just a few selected categories, showing where growth is coming from, the NPD contribution to value growth in private brand this is. So just to explain what this is showing, if you look at this first column, packaged and prepared meals, what this is saying is that there were 14% of products delisted within the category, or within that sector or segment, I should say, during that period. 17% growth came from the core business, but 97% of the growth that came out of that segment was driven by NPD in private brand. When you move along to the right, ice cream, cones and wafers, pretty mature, 11% was NPD. So obviously largely any growth that came out of it was core, but it still does show that there's still, even in those types of categories, a lot of growth potential. Processed milk products, about 70% was the contribution of NPD in private brand towards growth. Canned vegetables, you don't get a lot more mature than that. Nearly half the growth came from NPD, and savoury snacks, not dissimilar. So there's a very, very strong retailer focus in this market on NPD to drive differentiation. Okay. What's interesting with this market is because we are an island and we've been, I guess to some degree, somewhat isolated, what we're finding is that Australian retailers are forming very strong alliances with international groups to support their private brand growth. They've all got very large teams, or both of the key retailers got very large teams managing and dedicated to the private brand sector. Woolworths, our largest retailer, they joined the European Marketing Distribution, so EMD, in 2017. EMD, for those who may not be aware, alliance of 13 members covering 250 grocery retail chains in 20 countries. So Woolworths are very much using that alliance to expand their private brand ranging, not only in terms of obviously leveraging skills internationally, but also sourcing as well. Coles have been very active as well. They first developed a partnership with Ocado back in March 19 to help support the evolution and development of their online delivery system. And they also partnered with Sainsbury's in 2019 as well to fast adapt private brand offerings. Some of you who may be familiar with this market, a couple of years ago now, the outgoing MD for Coles actually made a public statement that Coles would be 40% private brand share by 2023. Now they're currently sitting at 24%, so clearly they've got some way to go, but there's no doubt at all, with a lot of the work that's going on behind the scenes, but also partnerships such as this one with Sainsbury's are designed to fast adapt offerings, try products that have worked overseas, and then find ways to introduce them on a more permanent basis here. What's interesting now is we're yet to see a lot of significant impact on shelf of that partnership, which probably talks to the share position, but I dare say we'll see that change. Just a bit of show and tell on some of what they're doing. There's a lot of focus on exclusive brands. So of course it's still private brand, but they categorize it here as private label or own brand and exclusive brand. So just a few examples from Woolworths. The Thomas Ducks, which is also there used to be sort of a boutique type produce offering. They have a whole range built around that. Barbecue is obviously very popular in Australia. Woolworths launched a whole barbecue brand last year, and with everybody at home, it was incredibly successful. Plantitude, which is one of their obviously their plant-based offerings, and a couple of other offerings there built around cooking at home as well. Just a couple of other quick examples. Farmer's Own, they do have some provenance-based brands. This is one of them. So this is in dairy in particular. Obviously, a lot of health-oriented brands here. Free from gluten. Macro is their primary health brand or health positioning brand, if you like, which has got a very strong focus. Woolworths Essentials is their sort of, we talk 3 tiers, etc. The old 3-tier, which everyone will be aware of. Woolworths Essentials is pretty much their first tier, their entry tier in their private label range. Bunch is really interesting insofar as what they've done is Woolworths been very active with social media. They've built a very strong following with a range of very engaged consumers who not only talk a lot about their products online, the private brand products, their exclusive brand products, but also they use that forum as a way to test, and they even invite them into the office to taste products through development, etc., etc. So they're really quite smart the way they're leveraging it. A lot of products across personal care, nappies, etc., and dog food, cat food, you name it. There's a lot of brands within the portfolio, and it continues to grow. Coles, not dissimilar, and you can see where obviously a lot of the growth is coming from here. They have Nature's Kitchen, vegan range. There's a range of health offerings, including free from. There's sustainable seafood, wild tides. There's more provenance-based, authentic ranges such as Coles Mexico, etc., and of course dog food. Everyone has dog food. And just a couple of more examples from Coles. Coles Kitchen, a couple of years ago, actually not even a couple of years ago now, Coles acquired a manufacturer, one of the largest manufacturers of ready meals, chilled ready meals in Australia, and integrated that business into supporting the evolution of that whole ready meal space for them, and introducing some very premium meals in that area, which are very good quality. Koi is a personal care product. I'm Perfect. Woolworths has a similar one called the Odd Bunch, which essentially what they're doing here, and it sort of pulls on sustainability levers as well, insofar as they're saying, the carrots that are bent or the bananas that are the wrong color, or maybe it's the other way around, that they are still perfectly good, and have sort of built brands around those. You can see down the bottom, Coles, the red banner that has been in the past there, and it is always evolving, but it has been their if you like, in-house or their own brand positioning. Coles Finest is their premium tier. And one thing I just want to draw your attention to is on the left there, all of the retailers here, particularly Coles and Woolworths, are very active in promoting the quality of their products on social media, and they're the first to, and quite rightly so, to sing out about products winning awards, because they're particularly in a market that is so heavily dominated by 2 retailers. The only real opportunity they've got to really build differentiation through their store offering is through their private brands, and it's no wonder there's such a strong focus on it, and will continue to be. Okay, just want to touch briefly on China, and goodness knows there's been a lot of, China's an ever-evolving market, but there's been a lot of change in the last couple of years, and today just wanted to just cover off a couple of metrics, but then talk about what's happened in the last couple of years in terms of changes since our last Global Master Session. Firstly, just some data out of Worldometers. In terms of population, China now represents 18.4% of global population, and India is 17.7%. So between the two of them, they are both powerhouses. So in terms of where is the market heading and share of people, basically, across the world, these 2 markets are absolutely key and will be growth centers. There's no doubt at all about that. Just some data out of Euromonitor. Nearly 1 billion people will be urbanized by 2030 in China, which is quite amazing. What they have in China is a number of mega cities, and it's not quite coming up, but I'm sure it'll probably come up in rapid speed in a moment. There we go, 6 mega cities with 10 million people. The estimate is 37% population growth predicted by 2030. So you saw those figures a moment ago. Well, it's going to get even more condensed, and strong growth in regionalised retailers to meet the trend. So just want to touch on briefly on retail dynamics in China. probably the biggest thing that sticks out is they are now the #1 e-commerce market in the world. A couple of years ago, when we were talking these figures, they were a bit over $1 trillion US, which was enormous in its own right. They're now, to put that in perspective, 2 times the size of a European e-commerce market, 3 times the size of a US market, and they're dominated by 2 key players, which most of you would know, being Alibaba and JD.com. And both of those, we don't have time to cover today, but both of those are very involved in the bricks and mortar melding, if you like, between what we call OTOs, so online to offline. So very, very powerful combination. Okay, just want to cover off what has happened in the last couple of years. Within China, it is continuing to be a dynamic, fast-moving retail environment. There's a really strong growth in community stores. Now, community stores are stores that are 1 kilometre or less from your home, and includes, as you can see on the right there, that fresh store. So there's a big focus on fresh outlets. Convenience stores, certainly the likes of Watson's, who've got about 3,000 stores, as estimates that they'll have about 10,000 in the next 2 to 3 years. So there's a big, very strong focus on convenience. Auchan, as well as exiting China, that was just announced fairly recently, which is interesting, and Thomas had touched on them a little bit earlier. Carrefour, who were in China, actually announced plans a couple of years ago, basically that they are exiting out of China. So now, really, Walmart is the only major international retailer still operating in China in a full sense. It's driving sales through group buying, and this is not when I think group buying, I immediately think of retailer group buying, but this is not. This is consumer group buying. So consumers wanting to buy in bulk, and a lot of the e-commerce giants are putting together facilities and processes to help support that. Live streaming is established as a new channel. Now, it's not a new channel per se, but it's a new channel for what we're talking about here today, particularly with private brands. A couple of years ago, key opinion leaders, KOLs as they're called, and a lot of these guys make a lot of money making ads to sell cosmetics and beauty products. Well, now they're actually being approached by retailers to sell or to promote private brand products. Anti-monopoly rules also to rein in e-commerce giants when you've got such a strong growth within this region. The government are very focused on making sure that that's under control. And the last but most important point perhaps here is private brands are growing very strongly. So Walmart has 4,000 SKUs now within private brand. I actually launched 600 last year in the middle of a pandemic. So between Walmart, Yonghui, which is a local retailer, and of course Alibaba, they'd be the 3 who are probably the most prominent in that space at the moment. There are definite opportunities. So, certainly being driven by Walmart, the expansion of a market and expansion of private brand opportunities within this space are absolutely enormous. So certainly if you're interested in this region, that's certainly something to keep a watch on. And I'm going to hand over now, I believe, to Edgar to talk private brands around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. So let's go to the next one. Working with retailers, quite an interesting question. I've been a retailer myself for a little bit more than 20 years. So some of the stuff I'd like to share with you is based upon my own experience. Developments on the retail side, let's talk with that one first, and then we will translate that a little bit in terms of what are the recommendations for private label suppliers for them to be successful in Europe. First of all, market is challenging in Europe, and maybe more than ever. And I mean that. What you see, of course, is that customers are extremely demanding. It's definitely a customer market. They want to have it all. They want to have it now, and they do not want to pay too much for it. So that's a second point. Value has become extremely important. Also, because of the discounters, we got to get used to the fact that a very good quality product doesn't necessarily have to be expensive. And that is going to stick around in Europe. Competition is increasing, especially coming from all kind of different directions. And you see that on the next slide where it's coming from 4 different angles. So the traditional full service supermarket, the one that we know so well, is under pressure. It's coming from out of home, definitely. It's coming from discount price fighters. E-commerce is booming, and specialty retailers are doing well here in Europe as well. So you do not want to stick in the middle. In other words, the all things to all people offer is under pressure. Maybe that is not the way to go anymore, and we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to change the game, otherwise we will simply not stick around. And we have seen some sad examples here in the European market of used to be great retailers that are not there anymore. And this is what we need to change. We need to change our mindset, our KPIs, and because of that, we need to have new skills. And this is very different for retail, not only in Europe, but also definitely in other parts of the world. We need to stop thinking about products only. We need to start thinking in terms of brands. We need to go from short-term to more long-term scope. You know, retail has always been about the next 5 minutes, and now it is about where are we 5 years from now. Very different mindset, from tactics to strategy. And from that margin focus that we always had, like it need to be 30% or it need to be 35% in the category, we need to start thinking about having people in our stores. It's about traffic, getting people in. It's about loyalty, keeping people in. Those things are important. And that's definitely a different mindset, but this will stick around. Price negotiations will be there. Value is important, competition is increasing. So you can only deliver a great product to a customer if you are still out there. And this is what we need to do. You see on the bottom part of the slide how it works for retail. It's a very simple picture. 100 is the selling price, 75 is cost of goods sold, 20 is related to replenishment cost, 3 is additional or extra cost, and then 2 is EBIT. And maybe it is 2 or 3%, but that's basically what it is for a food retailer nowadays. So think about the moment that you're able to bring the 75 down, the cost of goods sold with 1%, you see that the math is really working out. Your profit, you're on the lowest level, is actually increasing with almost 40%. So price negotiations will always be a big part of what we do in Europe. So, but it's not only that. Costs are only interesting the moment that you manage them when you still have people in your store. So it becomes much more a balancing act. And it's not necessarily so that the one is more important than the other, but you need to make sure today that you cover both. You do not have the time to say the next 5 years is only about cost optimization, and then we will think about points of differentiation. Now, those two things need to go hand in hand. And you can only do that the moment that you really have a very sophisticated way of working with your suppliers. Otherwise, it's getting too complicated and you're going to miss your direction. So you need to work on both sides. That's what I said. Scale is important. Has always been important for food retail. It's all about quantity, volume, rotation. And in order to get that, we were joining buying groups. I will talk about it in a second. I think Bill also mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. Now, please go to the previous one. On the right side, you will see that we need to go more in depth. So it's not only about quantity, it will also be about quality. So we need to get better processes in place. We need to make sure that we not only get data, but actually we're able to translate data into action, better tools, but definitely also better people, because the name of the game in retail is changing and things are getting more complex. So this is an example of this slide, and the next one I will talk about the 6 big buying groups that we have across Europe. You see, don't look at all the details in the slide, but what you see here, if you think about the potential consumer turnover, that these guys are huge. 180 billion, 140 billion, 140 billion, and that is what we were trying to do. We needed to compete with the big discounters in the market, and some of these guys are 100 billion just by themselves. It's not only about economies of scale, but as Bill said, it's also to drive innovation, work together, picking ideas and products from each other on a national level, but also on an international level. Next one, please. You see the other 3 that we have around here, AMS, BIX, and Eurochamp. So these are the 6 of the top 10 players in Europe, actually part of an international buying group. But then I talk about Kaufland, Metro, Aldo Heijs, Edeka, Rewe, and Auchan. That means that 4 are not part of it. But then again, Carrefour and Tesco are joining forces today. So they work together from a buying point of view. Aldi and Lidl do have the size that they are buying groups by themselves. So they don't need to join anybody else. So basically the top 10 is all focused on scale. And that will not go away in the near future. I think that those entities actually will get only bigger. Then again, it's not only about skill, it's also about getting better at the game. And we needed to find a tool in order to work slightly different with our suppliers. And this is just a simple example of mapping your supplier community into 4 different boxes. And now we know how to work with a very strategic supplier, and we know how to work with a very transactional supplier. And that's very different from each other. So this allows us to be more efficient and more effective in the way how we are working with our suppliers across Europe. We needed to work on something else than only leverage buying. So scale is nice, but you can only do that for a period of time. At a certain moment, you will see that the line is going to flatten out, and then the savings, the incremental savings will simply not be there. And that was a starting point for coming up with anything like strategic sourcing. And I know that we've seen this also in other parts of the world. It's all about managing your supplier, making sure that you got enough suppliers, making sure that you manage your cost of goods sold, making sure that you work on intelligence, on good ideas, on innovation and R&D as well. You see that on the next slide. People have the tendency to think about it in the wrong way. It's not about cost. It's not about necessarily the cheapest products, and it's not about beating up suppliers. This is really actually a tool to be very transparent in a partnership, to work together and to make it a win-win situation. I've seen many, many examples actually where this worked out really nicely for both parties. So let's talk about some of the supplier preparations that we can do in order to get ready for this. First of all, we need to talk a little bit about, very briefly, about the difference between the US and Europe. What you see in the US is that there is a middleman, which is called the broker. In many cases, there are in-house brokers or the bigger consortiums or regional players. So Acosta, a lot of people will know, or Damon, Federated, MMI, these are all very big companies that are playing a role in the middle between the manufacturer and the retailer on the other hand. And you can question yourself, and more companies in the US are actually doing that. Is this really working out for me? Does those people represent my interest? Are they not too expensive? And what are the alternatives? And I've seen many retailers already, also in the US, that are going much more to what we call maybe is a more European model. And let's go to the next one, where you will see actually that there are no brokers in Europe, hardly any. What you see is that the manufacturer is playing a very important role, and they need to manage their own business. And that's most of the time done by the account manager or a group of account managers. They are working on the retailer. So this is a one-to-one kind of relationship. And that also means a lot for the account manager. It means that those guys need to work on production capabilities. They need to work on intelligence. They need to work on consumer marketing. They need to work on branding. They need to work on the design of the product, etc., etc. So it also puts a lot of pressure on the manufacturer. And we spoke about this earlier. I just want to mention there are a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, there will be some requirements because of all this when you add it all together. Let's go to the next one. So this is what they need to do as a private label supplier. You need to make sure that you understand your role. Where do you come in? Are you very much about pricing, or are you very much about differentiation? I spoke about the 4 boxes earlier. It is possible to go from one box to the other, but there are clear requirements from the retailer, and it helps to really know where you are. Make sure that you understand the retailer, and I don't mean that from a very high level point of view. It's not only about positioning or strategy or private label, but it's definitely also about all the challenges and opportunities in the market, because you need to tailor your product or your program towards that retailer. You cannot come on with a one-size-fits-all approach. And of course, make sure that you understand the market, the different competitors, the customer, etc., etc. There will be a lot of data involved. It's very sophisticated relationship with many, many retailers here in Europe. So you need to make sure that you're talking fact-based and you're talking about solutions and not about products in many cases. Many suppliers here have now taken by now a leading role in the category. So don't think that that leading role is there for the CPGs. In many cases, when you look at our private label share across Europe, you will see that some private label suppliers actually driving the growth, is driving the change. So we've seen this on the left side before. That's why I said nothing new. But at the same time, I have seen that it's getting more complicated because it needs to be really relevant. There needs to be a lot of depth involved, and there needs to be a lot of speed involved because the world is changing so quickly. So you need to bring your A game nowadays when you're going to meet with a retailer. The last slide, and I'm really trying to stick to the time frame that I have. Position yourself as a partner, as somebody who really cares. And sometimes it helps not only to talk about your product or your category, but talk about something bigger, talk about what is important for the overall retailer. Help him somewhere else. That really builds a relationship. Create some context. So the moment that you explain to a retailer why there is a need, It's not about the product, but it is about a solution. So we're really moving from push to pull, from production facility, from product to customer and marketing. Be ready to start a different kind of relationship, very much something like a partnership, where you even co-produce products, a lot of innovation focused way of working. And be dedicated to private label. We've seen a slide at the beginning about B and C brands. There are hardly any anymore. In many categories, it is pretty simple. You got a national brand, maybe one or two, and then you have a big area for private label. So be dedicated in the way how you work together with retail, and be dedicated in the way how you work together with private label. That's what's really working for retail in Europe. Thank you very much. I think I did this rather quickly. Back to Jim, I assume.
Yes. Okay, we're going to take you through our stretch drive right now and really answer the fundamental question, what's different about private brands for a manufacturer, and should you be in it? Well, let's start. Why should you be doing it? It is, for most manufacturers, more cost effective, you both on the production side and supply chain side. But I think equally important, or more important, it's really a gateway to selling other products or more products to your retail customers. It creates very sticky relationships. Frankly, right now, retailers are looking to expand their range of private brand suppliers that they do business with. For a manufacturer, generally there's fewer fees. You don't get hit up as much with slotting and some of the rest. And right now, it's where the growth is. But there may be some reasons to not do it. Tom, why not? Tom, you're on mute.
Thank you for that. There's a big issue around company culture, and some companies are able to understand and pivot into private brand if they're not there already. But it's a hurdle that many manufacturers will have to face, getting into which companies will work and which don't. There's a lack of understanding with some retailers, a diminishing number, but there is a lack of understanding of the power of private brand. And it's a complex situation. You're managing a whole lot of different issues in terms of managing the development of products for private brand than you are with just buying in A or B brands, national brands, from a manufacturer or from a wholesaler. So it's much more complex. The category economics have to be right. There's very great competitive situations from one retailer to another, and you may be battling a retailer that's very strong compared to you, and they may have a really strong private brand program and you don't. So how easy is it going to be to get in there? So that's a tough one. And the whole issue of cost efficiency. If you have to start building your own quality assurance, you have to start building your own package design and your own sourcing teams, you may have to spend a lot of money on the innovation required to do that, which you may not be able to return on that investment. So time, energy, and resources are a big factor. And if you don't believe in doing it, it won't work. And you have to find a manufacturer that really does believe that there's a future in building a private brand program. And as a manufacturer, you have to believe that you can, if you're already making A or B or national brands, and you want to get into private brands, you've got to believe it too. You can't just hive it off and say, oh, well, we'll pick up a little bit of private brand business because we're quiet with our other products at this time of the year or this time of the season. You've really got to believe that it's an important strategy for your business. So many companies that have failed, there are common denominators. They fail to view the opportunity as anything but an outlet for excess capacity, and they treat it as second class within their organization. So supply chain systems, finances, all of that can back up a private brand business. But sales and marketing and merchandising have got nothing similar between if you have a national brand business and a private brand potential business. They just don't meld. So should you be in the business? There are special needs. Maybe there is an in-house broker situation, or there's certainly a different way of selling to that retailer. The label information and product specs is a big issue, and there's got to be a very, very fast-moving, real-time data sharing platform, so that when you're working on getting your specification right with a retailer and the retailer is waiting for the manufacturer to get back to them on an ingredient question, all of that stuff that's lifeblood for national and A brand manufacturers. It's not necessarily lifeblood for a retailer who's not strong in private label. ongoing lot samples. There's constant requiring of testing and samples. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. Manufacturer from North America selling into Australia spent about 8 months building a back and forth with samples until suddenly they realized that GMO was not allowed at that retailer in Australia. And they'd spent an awful long time without really getting into the detail of, oh, you don't allow GMO in your product. So that's a change. Third-party testing takes time and it costs money. Lead times are different. Artwork responsibility. Who pays for the artwork? You may think as a manufacturer, you can negotiate that the retailer pays for the artwork, but once the manufacturer is hit with 6 or 8 or 10 iterations in a month, because suddenly somebody changed their mind and another person changed their mind, suddenly the costs are going out of control. Plant inspections, yeah, plant inspections are a fact. And then special fees or assessments. Is there listing fees? No, there isn't generally, but there are other ways that retailers can extract money out of the cost base for a private brand offering. Jim, back to you.
Yeah, the path to market can be very confusing, perhaps more so in the US than anywhere else. Europe is a little more, I'm a manufacturer, I sell to the retailer. The US, it can go through brokers, exporters, consolidators. You can be self-distributing, going through a distributor or a wholesaler. Carving out this path is going to be different for the right answer, almost different for every company and every product in every category. And that's really the key to unlocking how to move forward.
So the time to shelf is a lot longer. It's a lot longer than if you suddenly see a product that you saw advertised in a magazine, at a trade show. You see a product that you want to buy. If it's from a brand, you can have it listed really quickly. But for private brand, it's a whole different ball game. So I'm not going to spend time. There's some detail here, which you'll see if you view the recording later. But basically, there could be as much as 36 weeks in some retailers in terms of time to get to market. Some retailers regard a year as being quick to get to market. Some retailers require 6 months to get to market. But on average, you're looking at somewhere around 36 weeks, which is clearly, it's a different ball game to get a product from a private brand supplier onto a shelf in a retailer who's very strong in private brand. Even the strongest are going to take a good 9 months.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the differences in economics here between national brand manufacturers and private brand. Your manufacturing costs will be higher, your marketing expense much less, trade promotions certainly less. You may incur a little additional overhead because you'll have to sink some additional costs perhaps in changing over lines. Your selling expense will be a little bit less, your packaging will cost more. Most important, though, is really the view and attitude that you have towards private brands. You get that one back. Thank you. Part of it is, where do I fit in a continuum? Is my expertise in making low-cost commodity-based products that I can compete in that level? Should I be focusing on value brands or moving to the other end? Can I do unique and customized things and things that are very specific to individual retailers? And your degree of risk and your degree of requirements in terms of what you have to have in place are going to be different to each one of those. So the key thing is to figure out where you are on that continuum. Some differences in cost data. If you add everything up, the real difference and the real savings you incur is in your indirect costs. This is from some activity-based cost work we've done. Your indirect costs, and this is an average number, and it's a fire and ice average, maybe say for a typical product, 27 cents versus $1.12. This is in US dollars. What happens at the end of the day is that your gross profit for private brand may be somewhat less than you're getting on your own brands. But when you go back and look at your return on the invested capital and the incremental return you get on the additional sales, then they start to become very comparable, or in some cases, even better. So take a look at selling price. Again, going direct to a retailer, particularly if you're in the same market's fairly straightforward. You understand if you're going through many of these different channels or levels or layers, you can see a difference. If you go to the right column here, your X Works price may be $2. By time it gets to the shelf, going through, different layers and different people handling it, it could be anywhere from selling at $5.39 to $7.59. And we sometimes see a lot of manufacturers from overseas really not doing these calculations and understanding, if they're using distributors or importers, how that needs to be incorporated into the total price.
So you really got to decide, are you going to follow the water downhill? There is no one single right answer to building your business. You've got to look at volume potential, and you've got to compare what you could supply with what an individual retailer that you're targeting might need. If a retailer would need 12 containers of product across their distribution network of warehouses, 12 full containers to start, if you can't produce that 12 full containers in a very short space of shelf life utilization, then that's not a retailer that you can deal with. Cost versus distribution. What does the customer actually want in that marketplace? And every market is extremely competitive. I've been traveling the world looking at private brand for a long, long time. There's not a single country or region that I've been to that doesn't have an extremely competitive situation already. They're not sitting there waiting, saying, this is new for us, come on in, we're ready. That's not the attitude that you're going to find, but you've got to work hard. You will work hard and you will get great rewards by targeting the right retailer to match what you can produce and at a cost that you can produce it at. The ability to command premium price, this whole issue of value, definitely value is changing. And as Jim talked earlier, we've gone from one view of value to a totally different view of value with today's consumer. So that's where private brand sits. And we talk innovation, as I did earlier, innovation and product and brand portfolios, there's lots of opportunity out there. What's next?
Okay.
Jim.
I get to the next right now. There we go.
Thank you. So in planning your strategy, think about, are you serious about it? Do you have the capabilities to suddenly increase your output as a manufacturer? How important is it? And do you still have capacity that you have not maximized in your home market? Or have you got capacity that you don't think you can sell in your home market? Do you have resources to do the planning? It's no good saying, yeah, okay, we're going to go abroad, we're going to go to this country or that country. You've got to take a look at the map. You've got to take a look at what's there and whether your products match from a capacity, from a quality, and from a whole culture standpoint. So look at the map, where in the world. And then we've seen a lot of examples today of what retailers in what countries. You've seen great data from Edgar, great data from Bill, and you've seen a whole bunch of stuff from the US. There's clearly markets in the world, but you've got to think about who and to start planning your next steps.
So you need to figure out a way to navigate the maze, and just a couple quick closing issues here. What's right? How do you get it all done? Well, you can get by with some help from your friends, and certainly reaching out to any one of us can help you address and answer some of the questions depending on where in the world you want to go. Also to let you know that we will be reappearing in a actually extended 2 half-day workshop that'll be coming later in this year. It's something to watch out for. We'll get into a lot more depth than we were able to today, but that will be coming up, and we'll have workshops and checklists and all kinds of supplemental materials for you at that time. And finally, if you're coming to the US, if you just want to write down the name, you can look it up, but there is a group that does assist companies coming from overseas. And essentially what they provide is the entire back office system. So they can get you through all those little tricky things at probably a lot less cost than you can get it done yourself. So that's our story. We're sticking with it. And I really thank all of you for being a part of this today. And from all of us to you, thank you very much.